Good day, good night. Welcome to our YouTube page of the Sports Podcasting Network. Thank you for subscribing right about here, and thank you for taking the time to listening to us today. There's been a lot of talks lately in the news, in the sports news, about how to restart soccer in North America. Major League Soccer has a plan in place in Orlando, of course, and it's still in the works. There's a lot of discussions. We had the last couple of days Alejandro Bedoya, player of the Philadelphia Union, who was very vocal in his appearance on Taylor Twellman's banter about what he thought was going to happen with this, and as a player, how he feels. And there's a lot about the positive, the negative, and I'm here just to give my thoughts a bit for whatever that's worth, and to also look at both sides of the situation and how this could all unfold for soccer fans, for soccer players, for soccer team owners also in the next few months. As we know, it was reported last week by Stephen Goff of the Washington Post, and then amazing reporting also on The Athletic by Sam Stekal, Paul Tenario, and also Jeff Rauter over the last few days and weeks, a couple of days actually, straight with great content on The Athletic about what this could look like. But let's take a look at what this could entail. There's almost like a 10 weeks scenario for players if you go all the way, where you'll be removed from your family and you'll be in Orlando, not necessarily sequestered, and I don't think we should equivalent to a prison, but I think it is maybe possible to look at it as a very limited options to go out of this protected bubble. Yes, amenities and everything needed will be there, but the lack of presence of family. And if families are present, what will be their freedom? It's not like they can't go out of the bubble also. So there's a lot to take into considerations when we're talking about uprooting players, uprooting teams, and finding ways to having a one-hub playing situation, which is looked at by Major League Soccer right now. We're still far away from this happening. Let's remember the timeline set by Don Garber a couple of weeks ago. Every team needs between 3 to 4 weeks of uninterrupted practice. So that means, example, if you cross the border from Canada to the United States, you would need 3 to 4 weeks after that of uninterrupted practice before you could start again. And that's if you can cross the border. Because right now, as we know, the Montreal Impact are one of the 6 or 7, depending of the sources. The Impact says 6 teams are not training, and Frédéric Laure of the Sport mentioned 7 on social media yesterday. But there's 6 or 7 teams out of the 26 that are not training right now, that did not have the go-ahead by their local authority to restart training, the training in the facility for individual training only, of course. And unfortunately for the Montreal Impact, one of their players yesterday, midfielder Steven Sabah, fractured a stress fracture. It might not be, it's not an open fracture, it's not a compound fracture we're talking about. We're talking about what's looking like a stress fracture to the left foot. For Steven Sabah, running in the streets of Montreal, jogging just normally in the streets. But my point is, there's still a lot of teams not practicing individually. So the timeline is 3 to 4 weeks once training starts, and then you can maybe look into a hub situation. And that's still taking place to quarantining if you travel, if you expose your team and your players to travel situation between Montreal to Orlando, or whichever the possibility could be. There's a 2 weeks of quarantining there also. So that does play into part. So example, 3 to 4 weeks, all the teams are getting ready. They're still ready. There's still 2 weeks of travel and quarantine once you get to Orlando. And that's where it becomes still about 6 weeks, if not 8 weeks. So we're talking about almost a 2 months scenario. July 4th, which, if you're a Soccer Today listener, has been one of Dwayne and I's target date to maybe when we'll see North American soccer again. Maybe this is actually too early. But what are the players going to say about this? Because we've heard Alejandro Bedoya, we've heard a lot of other players saying the one hub with 26 teams makes the logistics of it really complicated, and the hub aspect also. But what if you could break down that hub into a couple of hubs? Maybe that's a possibility. 26, you 26, you find a way to divide this as most equally as possible regionally, also trying to cut costs where you can. It is also 2020, it's a pandemic for everyone. There's things that will need to happen, which is one of the things also the players are talking to the league about, is how are they going to deal with the cuts? And according to multiple sources, now it's likely like a third almost of the players' salaries will be, but at different brackets than it was. That's a counter proposal of Major League Soccer Players Association to Major League Soccer. The one thing also we need to know is the CBA hasn't been ratified. It's been agreed upon, but it hasn't been officially signed and ratified. So that could become a problem if no one agrees on that issue, on the salary and the player cuts for that aspect. But one thing that I think needs to be remembered is, logistically speaking, how does it happen? If it's Orlando, and then it raises more question about, is it fair for other market TV, local markets that might have Fox Sports affiliation with teams, and other aspects like that. ESPN, of course, Disney, ESPN's Worldwide of Sports would be the hub where players or games are take place. So that's what I think is important to remember, is logistically players are not necessarily agreed upon now, and there's a growing sentiment, and that's multiple sources. Journalists are making anonymous calls, or at least they're making calls to players they know and taking the answers anonymously, and there's a sentiment there from Major League Soccer players that, especially ones with families and ones that have pregnant partners, or just newlyweds, or just newborn kids, or just families, or just whatever the reasoning may be, if you do not feel necessarily compelled to isolate yourself in this way for soccer, who's to blame? And is there contingency plans for that? What about players who might not be able to come back? Because not every player is in North America right now. We know some international players have come back home. So can they come back? Are travel open? Can Canadian teams cross the border? And when we're looking at the news today in Montreal, there's a growing sense also that the Impact are not opposed of traveling, crossing the border early, maybe to be able to start individual practice, to follow suit with the league. We'll see what the local authority do say, but today there's been openness by a local authority to start opening other training facilities, track and things like this. So, well, track and field opportunities, athletics track, and other indoor, more outdoor gym and the sort are getting slowly the go ahead in the outside of Montreal region, and slowly for Montreal in the next couple of weeks, probably for June. So we're going to see how that affects the Montreal Impact's decision going forward. But that is also a possibility, is will Montreal or will other teams that are not right now able to train, like we're looking at some teams in California, like the Earthquakes, and we're looking at other teams in the New York region that has been hit hard, in the New Jersey region also, so the Red Bulls, NYCFC. We're looking at Washington, D.C. also, so teams that are not able to train even individually right now. And if so, are they going to travel to be able to train earlier? And if they travel, if they get together, the quarantine. So we're looking at a long timetable before we get things started. And will the players agree? And how do you agree? Do you have a vote? What do you do to make sure everyone agrees about how do you restart? And is it that important? I think it is important to have sports back and to create that sense of not like diversion and entertainment while things are wrong, while going down and they're not enjoyable, while people are confined, but you do need some sense of distraction. And even though how important football would be as a distraction, it is needed we're just looking at the ratings of the Bundesliga over the weekend on Fox and FS1 in the States, and here in Sportsnet in Canada. They're the best soccer ratings in a long time here in Canada. So there is a need and people do want their soccer back. How do you address that? How do you make it safe for everyone? Because we have been surprised. UFC have pulled off a couple of good events in Florida and Jacksonville over the last couple of weeks. So that is positive. We've seen also Bundesliga, no new cases. That is positive. We've seen the K-League Korea restart again with few positives. So when is it actually okay to restart also? Because some sports are happening in Florida, and so far so good actually. If it's looking for the UFC, we're still waiting for more results, and it's probably Friday by the time you're looking at this. So it is interesting to see. But sports will come back. We like it or not, they're going to come back. Players either are going to accept and come back, or new players are going to come. And that is a question that I'm asking myself and you. What needs to be done? Is it fair for the players to isolate them from 8 to 10 weeks and ask them to play games, 3 games a week, don't come out, you eat where we tell you, you sleep where we tell you? Is that fair? If this was not sports, if this was hospital workers, which actually a lot of hospital workers have been living this for the last 2 months, is they have been isolated from their family, and they have been just work and come home and eat what we tell you before, for the benefit of everyone. So we do commend and we appreciate all the workers' sacrifices, but it would be a sacrifice for the players. How do you deal with that? If we're looking at players that are making barely a livable wage in the Canadian Premier League and in the USL, can you ask these players to go to Moncton or whichever a potential hub could be for the Canadian Premier League? Is it fair to ask them to do so? Those are all great questions that I wish I had the answer. But I'm asking you, what do you think? If you are a Major League Soccer player listening to this, what do you think? Let me know. You know how to reach me. sportspodcast@gmail.com. My DMs are open anonymously also. But if you're fans, how bad do you miss your MLS, your CanPL, your USL? How much do you want it back? And what are you willing to sacrifice as a fan to get it back? What are players willing to sacrifice? And what are owners willing to sacrifice? Maybe ESPN is the one who's going to gain a lot from all this and get maybe an unfair shot of getting the next deal of rights for Major League Soccer locally and, of course, nationally for 2022, I believe. So a lot of questions still needs answering, and we don't have the answers. We just know the clock is ticking for the owners. They want soccer back, and they're going to find a way. How do we make sure everyone agrees on how it comes back? That's my question. Is it fair? I don't think it's fair to ask players to isolate for 10 weeks, but I don't think it's fair for owners. I don't think it's fair for owners for players to just say no and not have another proposition. Is there a way to meet in the middle? Is there ways to make like the NWSL with a shortened type of hub, and maybe you have a couple of them throughout the season, a couple of tournaments? You need to make sure that it's worthy of your trophy also. If it's just a Mickey Mouse trophy, do you give MLS Cup? Do you give the Philip F. Schutz trophy to the winner of ESPN's 2 months tournament? Those are all great questions. And I guess we're going to have the answers in a few weeks. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe right here. Make sure you like this video also, and you click the notification bell so that way you'll know every time we post a new video on our YouTube page. Make sure you catch Soccer Today, Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Podcasts available everywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, until next time, have a great soccer.